Okay.
And we are so glad y'all are here. This is part of our series on changing your thinking. There's a lot of, there are many ways of our thought patterns that can cause more negativity and more stress in our lives. And how can we change those, identify them, and change those negative thought patterns? We've talked about several of them so far: all or nothing thinking, discounting the positive, you name it. There's a bunch there. Today, we're going to talk about magnification and minimization. Specifically dive deep into what that looks like and how can we change those thought patterns when we start to have them. Because really all distortions in thinking kind of come down to, have we ever had a negative thought or feeling? We can all probably say, yes, we have. Does your attitude lean sometimes more to a negative side of things? Do you feel the glass is half empty, or is it half full? Different times of our lives, we see it differently, right? Do you ever blow things out of proportion? That's what we're going to talk about today. I know I've done that. All of these thoughts that we have, again, we have them from time to time, but if these negative thoughts are not caught, or if we can't identify them, and we ruminate on them, or they're reinforced without being challenged, they can really cause increased anxiety and depression and stress in our lives. And that's the last three things that we need in our lives, on top of other stuff. It doesn't just negatively affect our lives, but it affects those around us too, because it changes how we might behave and how we might react to things. So it really does cause us to see our world inaccurately or falsely. We might misinterpret a situation, what somebody said, a conversation we had, and we usually misinterpret it in a negative way. But these attitudes and these thoughts and feelings and behaviors are all caused by what our thought is. These distorted thoughts do turn our perceptions of our world into one-sided. They're inaccurate, or they're false, they're unfair, cause us to be bitter or resentful. And then again, they do cause higher rates of depression and anxiety, more self-criticism, low self-esteem, and then helplessness and hopelessness also. So just hopelessness on the situation or where I'm at in my life. So specifically talking about magnifying the negative and minimizing the positive, this magnification minimization. It is a distorted thought pattern that typically involves exaggerating or minimizing the meaning of something important or the likelihood of things to happen. So it might take an insignificant event, like a small mistake, a minor error, something trivial, but we exaggerate it to make it be something that was really important. What it also does is it can take significant events or personal achievements or things that went really well, and it lessens the meaning or the importance of that significant event or significant situation. Blowing problems out of proportion, and the positive aspects in our lives can be easily ignored or just easily glossed over. I think we can all maybe identify with doing this. In this picture here is how to make mountains out of molehills. I could probably write that book. I've written that book sometimes on certain things. So, and it's also, they also call this maybe catastrophizing, or it's the binocular trick is another way people describe this distorted thought pattern. But really it magnifies, it takes our fears and it magnifies our fears. And it minimizes our ability to cope if we're not managing these thought patterns well, right? Again, you take something insignificant, or something might make you feel insignificant because you're putting your good traits aside, or you're saying these good traits about me are unimportant. The magnification of this can lead us to feeling out of control, and that the world around us is just crashing in. It also paralyzes us from moving forward. If I feel like my world is crashing in, or I don't have any control over anything because I've magnified this insignificant event or situation, then I have a hard time moving forward or moving past it. Instead of maybe just taking a little step over that molehill, now I'm staring at this big mountain thinking there's no way I can get around that. And really the dangers of this is it does dramatically increase our anxiety and our depression when we have these thought patterns about it could be a time of our life or it could be a situation in our life. So what this sounds like is several examples. So I've used the wrong statistic on my report to my boss. I'm going to get fired. So there was a minor thing that can easily be fixed or easily corrected, but that one mistake is what I focused on. Now I'm going to get fired. An alcoholic believes that they don't have a problem, so they're minimizing the problems that they have. You can see it goes both ways. An athlete who generally is a good player makes a little mistake and now believes that he's a terrible teammate. It's taking away that we're all humans and making mistakes, so you're putting more pressure on yourself that you have to be perfect. On the reverse side, an athlete who wins a coveted award in her sport continues to believe that she's only a mediocre player, or maybe that she didn't really deserve that award. Here's one: dad flushed a roll of paper towels down the toilet, and now we are going to need a whole new plumbing system. That's taking something and blowing it a little bit out of proportion. You might need to call a plumber, but a whole new plumbing system, that might be taking it to a whole nother level. And just because I did well this time doesn't mean I'm any good at this. Just because I said the right thing to mom this time doesn't mean I'm a good caregiver. So you can kind of hear that magnification and minimization of what's happening. This, just some more graphics, is magnifying minimizing the good. It's really small, but the bad is really huge, right? In the top graphic says 4% of people are annoyed by my article. So she's taking that small 4%, and that's what she's focusing on and blowing up. And her facial expression is anxiety, frustration, and self-criticism. So let's watch this quick. I think this video is just 2 minutes to help us understand a little bit more about this.
Welcome to Lesson 6 of the free Anxiety Relief course. In this lesson, you'll learn the 6th cognitive distortion, magnification and minimization. This is when you minimize other people's mistakes and magnify your own. Or you treat a small issue as an awful catastrophe. Have you ever gotten so worried or embarrassed that you started sweating? You take the issue way more seriously than a rational, objective person would. Do you see why that's a cognitive distortion? You awfulize a situation. Like if you give someone bad directions and think, oh no, what an awful mistake. It's not an awful mistake. It's just an average, everyday mistake. The key to overcoming this is to step away and tell yourself it's not the end of the world, and getting worked up over it won't make it any easier. Let's do an example. Corey breaks a drinking glass at a friend's house. Corey thinks, this is so embarrassing. Corey doesn't need to get embarrassed. People break glasses all the time, and if no one got hurt, there's really no harm at all. What Corey could think instead is, I feel bad about breaking the glass, but it's not the end of the world, and getting worked up won't fix the glass. So if you catch yourself magnifying or awfulizing, just remind yourself that it's not awful, and getting worked up over it won't make it any easier. It helps if you try to take yourself a little less seriously. The next lesson will cover the 7th cognitive distortion.
So I hope that helps define this a little bit more, and I like how it says awfulizing something, right? It's awful, it's awful.
Emotional reasoning.
So great news. We have the power to change our thoughts over time and change this thought pattern. Our thoughts, what we tell ourselves, influences our emotions and our beliefs and our feelings. Those emotions, belief will influence how we behave and the decisions we make. And of course, how we behave and decisions we make will influence our thoughts, go back into our emotions, our actions, behaviors. See, it's a cycle that's hard. You can't break the cycle. So we want to make sure we're telling ourselves the right things. So we have a good positive cycle. So with recognizing when I am magnifying something or minimizing something in a negative way, it does come down to, we got to stop and think about what we're thinking. What am I actually telling myself? What thoughts are weighing on me? What thoughts am I ruminating on, or am I mulling over? And it can be helpful to really write them down, journal them out, or just write down, here's the thought I'm having about this. And notice if there's any patterns or certain words that you're using. Minimization uses words like it's just, or it's only, it's no big deal, oh, that's nothing. We're minimizing the importance of something that we've done. Magnification is really the fact that the situation causing that distorted thought, the situation causing the blown out of proportion thought, is not a big situation. Again, it takes a minor event and turns it into a worst case scenario. I had this, I was late to work, I'm getting fired. Mom got agitated at me while I was trying to help her during the shower this morning. She doesn't like me anymore. She doesn't want me caring for her. And now all showers are going to be a fight. Not necessarily true, right? A personal example of something earlier in my life is I used to play the piano, and you would have to do recitals for the piano. And recitals always made me nervous, but I would make myself so much more nervous. Eventually, I just kind of don't even want to play the piano anymore, because I would maybe miss a few keys during the recital, and I just went into a panic. I could get through the song generally, but it's just like the rest of it is I'm blowing the whole thing out. I can't believe I missed that keys. Everybody noticed it. I'm not good at playing the piano. Why am I even doing this? Those few little mess-ups, which everybody messed up, hit a few wrong keys, right? But mine just blew it completely out of proportion to where I would start to physically sweat. Like the next recital, I would be sweating. I would be miserable. I'd get really sick to my stomach. Just made myself way more nervous than I needed to be, because it really is no big deal. Nobody even remembered that you might have missed a couple of keys. So that has affected my life dramatically in that area of my life, right? So how we can start so we want to recognize what are we thinking, what words are we actually using, and helpful to write that down. And then ask yourself, well, what would happen next? So if something bad happens, or this minor event that I'm magnifying, just say, what would happen next? And they do say this can be hard at first because bad things do happen. And immediately, a lot of times it's not okay. We kind of got to work through it, but we got to keep asking, well, then what would happen next? What would happen after that? What would happen next? And sometimes we can even think, well, what's the worst that what is worst case scenario? And then what would happen next? Go ahead and let yourself get to that worst case part, and then kind of think, okay, well, that sounds kind of unrealistic, especially if I'm writing it down and I'm telling myself positive things, but then what would happen next? It can help you even feel a little bit more in control, because you think, well, I've got a plan now, or, well, I guess that's not really that big of a deal. If I go to my next recital and I miss a few keys, and then you stand up to take your bow and everybody starts laughing at you and pointing and laughing like you're horrible. Okay, what would happen next? Well, okay, I would sit back down and we would get to the next person and play their song. What would happen next? Well, then I would go home. I wouldn't, it's not the end of the world, essentially, right? And then the next thing we want to do is write down a list of our most positive traits or our most positive characteristics, and not focusing on our physical traits. I want to focus on my positive characteristics of, I have a good sense of humor, or I'm a great listener, I am good at, as opposed to, well, I have good hair. I want to focus, write down those most positive characteristics or traits you have, and keep that list close and read it regularly, especially if you're going through a time where you have some distorted thought patterns, because this really helps offset any negative thoughts, any magnification or minimization of negative aspects in your life. And it can help us magnify positive aspects in our life when we need to. And then making a list of all the positives about the situation or about the event. And maybe even list the bad things too, the good and the bad, because there are always positives about a situation. As a matter of fact, our CEO just sent out an email to our board with there's some good news and some not so good news in the email. But one of her first paragraphs was, a positive about COVID is, I can work from home and still have control over this. And she even said, I'm thinking about all the positives in this not such positive situation. And we can all do that. And then taking a compliment with grace and acceptance. And we've talked about this before. Somebody gives you a compliment, you did a great job, or you played that song beautifully, or you're taking care of your mom so well. I don't know how I would be able to do it. You're doing a great job. And being able to say thank you, and then not saying anything else. A lot of times we say, well, thank you, but, or anybody can do that, or we're minimizing that positive. So if we can just say thank you and accept that compliment and take it with praise, that can go a long way. It will help us subconsciously start changing our thoughts as well. So again, we do have the power to change our thoughts. And this, of course, will change how we feel, and then it will change our actions and our decisions and how we respond. So keep in mind that changing a distorted thought pattern, whether it's magnification or minimization or discounting the positive, it is a process. And the goal is progress, not perfection. It's going to take time. We can't just sit down one day, write down all our positive traits, identify negative thoughts and negative words, and then everything's fixed. It is a process, and it takes daily discipline and time to do this. A negative mind will never give you a positive life. So we want to have positive thoughts to give us a positive life, give us a positive mind to have a positive life. And live in the present. We can't change the past, nor can we predict the future. And it's hard to do this alone. So being able to talk to trusted people who can help us see it from a different perspective, and be able to help us challenge some of those distorted thoughts that we might be having. And these two quotes on the side, so from the wise words of Ringo Starr, he said, at the end of the day, I can end up just totally wacky because I've made mountains out of molehills. With meditation, I can keep them as molehills. I like them. And then the other ones, the difference between a mountain and a molehill is our perspective. And that is very true. Holly, do you have anything to add on that, or?
No, but I tell you, as I was listening to you do it, boy, is that one that we are all guilty of. I mean, that's just one of those that I think probably each day we do a little bit of that. That's one of the more common ones, I think.